The cabinet reflects the divisions within the Tory party itself. It's interesting. David Cameron himself, he's what people have called a practical Eurosceptic. He's wanted to always get a good deal out of Europe, but if you're to take him at his word, he's never really wanted to leave Europe. And until he actually announced this referendum in January 2013 under great pressure from the Tory Eurosceptics in his own party, he had been very much opposed to the idea of a referendum. He spoke out as recently as June 2012 in Brussels, during a visit to Brussels, against a referendum, saying that, the problem with an in-out referendum is it boils down to you're just giving people two choices. It's an all-or-nothing thing. And David Cameron has always wanted to see a sort of more gray zone, a more nuanced sort of approach to Europe. What made him change his mind is he was literally forced to march towards a referendum by his party, by the right wing of his party. The pressure just became too much, and he was forced to cave into pressure. You'll speak to a lot of people on the Leave side, on the Eurosceptic side, and they will tell you that it was inevitable that Britain was going to have to call a referendum. And other people will say, oh, no, David Cameron caved into pressure. Perhaps another prime minister under other circumstances would never have called a referendum. So, there's even opposition over whether or not what we're seeing today, this penultimate step before launching this for Cameron, keep Britain in the EU campaign, whether this was all inevitable, this scenario, arriving at where we are today, staring at this door, waiting for the UK Prime Minister to step out, make an expected statement of a date for a referendum on whether Britain should stay in Europe. Was this an inevitable historical moment we're waiting for right now? Was it something that could have been averted? Have we all just accepted the fact or it's just become the conventional wisdom? Of course there was always going to be a referendum. And that was never really a foregone conclusion. It is true that the Eurosceptic current in Britain has been building drip by drip, and sometimes more than that, over the past years and even decades, and that Britain has always been an exception within Europe. Britain has always had its opt-outs. It's not a member of the Eurozone. It's not in the Schengen free circulation zone. It never signed the Charter on Fundamental Rights in the European Union. It's opted out of a lot of police and judicial cooperation conventions. So in many respects,
it's already halfway in the
Britain is already halfway out the door. The reason it is in Europe, and it is a member of the European Union, and this sounds like a tautology, is because it's a member of the European Union. In other words, it is still subject to the European Union treaties. So it's going to be very interesting. A lot of people say that this deal, on both sides, that this deal is really tinkering at the edges. It's really, it's a lot of, showmanship and posturing for the public, and that Europe is helping Cameron do all of this posturing, and that the deal itself isn't going to really make that much of a difference in the end in Britain's real relationship with Europe, because for all intents and purposes, on so many different levels, whether we're talking about immigration issues, economic issues, issues of sovereignty, the City of London and financial regulations, there's so many issues on which Britain already is really removing itself from Europe. And you talk about that clause in the EU's founding charter, the founding idea of ever closer union. Another thing that Britain has come away from Brussels, David Cameron came back, being able to sort of opt out of that. Britain will not be obligated to commit itself to ever closer union. You could say ever closer disunion, perhaps. But that's been also another sort of pillar of the European Union that Britain has stepped away from. And some people say if you're stepping away from that, you're essentially stepping away from the European project.